Deep beneath the ruins of a dead world, the explorers moved through endless tunnels of stone and ash. Their lights, cutting through the heavy dark around them. The air was thick with silence and weight of time, for this place had been untouched for ages, longer than memory, longer than history itself. Alien scholars whispered that no voice had been heard here for 1,000,000 years, yet now the sound of boots and claws echoed against the hollow walls. The party of explorers was mixed of many species, with long limbs and scaled hides, with crystal eyes and insect wings. Yet among them walked a small group of humans, their faces set with calm curiosity. They carried no weapons, only packs of tools and scanners. Their leader, a human archaeologist named Daniel, walked ahead, his hand brushing along the cold stone, his steps steady, though his heart raced, for he felt something deeper calling him forward, something waiting. They entered a vast chamber at the end of the tunnel. The roof stretched high above, lost in shadow. Pillars of broken stone surrounded a central dais upon which sat a crystal slab, so large it seemed grown rather than made. The surface glowed faintly, with colors shifting like stars in deep space. The aliens hissed with all. One whispered that it was older than their first empire. Another said it might be older than the galaxy itself. And Daniel stared, breath caught in his throat, for he knew what it was. The crystal was a star map etched with infinite care, every star, every cluster, every path marked with precision. The explorers leaned closer, tracing the glowing lights, whispering of constellations they knew, and many they did not. This was the galaxy, as it had been long ago in its first age, before the rise of councils, before the wars, before the written stories. Daniel pressed his palm to the edge and felt a strange pulse, as if the map itself was alive. Yet as their eyes scanned the map, wonder soon turned into unease, for there was something wrong. In the middle of the star chart, a hole stood out, not empty by accident, but carved with purpose, a system erased, as if cut away with deliberate care. The edges were sharp, the stars around it clear, but in that space where a world should be, there was nothing. The aliens murmured in fear. One asked why anyone would erase a world from the first star map. Another hissed that such work was forbidden. The chamber filled with whispers, growing louder. Some argued that it was a mistake, that age had broken the map. Others argued that no natural damage could erase only one system so cleanly that it had to be done with intent more ancient than any known war. Daniel listened in silence, his gaze locked on the missing space, his mind racing faster than the words around him. A scaled alien with golden eyes shouted that the erased system must have been cursed. Another said it was a prison world meant never to be found again. A third whispered that the oldest legend spoke of a place so dangerous that even the ancients feared to name it. Daniel felt his chest tighten, for the coordinates whispered in those half-forgotten myths were not strange to him. They were familiar in a way that made his skin grow cold. The council members who had come with the explorers began to argue, their voices harsh against the echoing stone. They demanded to know who had made this map and why it would cut away one world. Some believed the world had been destroyed so fully it was unworthy to remain on record. Others feared that the erasure was not about destruction, but about hiding something, hiding a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. Daniel kept his silence, though his fingers trembled as they moved across the glowing surface. He traced the path of stars that led to the missing space. He recognized constellations not from alien stories, but from human charts, old ones from Earth passed down in whispers through generations of hidden knowledge. No other being noticed the patterns. The humans had always seen different things in the stars, different connections, and now it was clear why. The debate grew louder, the air filled with fear and anger, voices clashing like weapons in the chamber, until the leader of the council slammed his hand against stone. His voice thundered across the room and demanded silence. He declared that the discovery would be sealed at once, that the coordinates must never be spoken, that no one would ever return to this place. But Daniel did not step back. Instead, he leaned closer to the map, his eyes locked on the erased system as though it called only to him. The explorers fell silent when they saw him move. His hand hovered above the carved-out void, his breath shallow, the glow of the crystal reflected in his eyes. The chamber seemed to grow colder. Every watcher, holding still, even the council leader, stopped speaking, for in that moment all could feel a strange pull from the missing place, as if the absence itself held power more heavy than presence, more sharp than truth. Daniel whispered, then his voice low, yet carrying through the chamber like a knife, through silence, his words simple but filled with weight, as if spoken by memory older than him, older than the stars themselves. He said, "I know these coordinates." The words left by Daniel did not fade. Instead, they hung heavy in the chamber, wrapping around every ear, every thought, every fear. The aliens turned their eyes toward him, some with suspicion, some with dread, some with a quiet hunger for knowledge that should never be spoken. The glow of the crystal map deepened, its colors shifting like waves of memory, as if it too had heard his whisper and waited for what would come next. The council leader narrowed his gaze, his voice sharp as a blade. He demanded to know how a human of all beings could recognize a place erased before time itself. He accused Daniel of lies, of tricks meant to twist fear into advantage. Yet Daniel stood steady, his hand pressed against the edge of the crystal, his breathing slow, though inside his heart thundered, for he knew the truth would bind him in chains or set him free, and either path would cut through the galaxy like fire. Daniel lifted his head and spoke, not with arrogance, but with certainty, his voice quiet, yet every creature in the room leaned closer to hear. He said, "The erase system is not a myth to my people. It is a place whispered of on Earth, a place hidden in the old star stories that our ancestors spoke before we even had ships, before we had councils, before we had names for the stars themselves." The chamber grew still as his words sank deep into minds that had believed humans were too young to hold such knowledge. The aliens hissed and muttered. One with silver scales declared it impossible that humans barely born among the stars could know of what was erased in the first age. Another shouted that this was proof humans meddled with forbidden power. Yet others stared with unease, for they remembered the way humans had surprised the galaxy again and again, turning weakness into strength and ignorance into advantage. Daniel met their eyes one by one, and though his voice trembled, he did not turn away. He began to tell them of the oldest tales, carved not into stone, but spoken across fires, whispered to children long before machines carried humans to other skies, stories of a world that did not exist, and yet did, stories of a shadow where stars bent and vanished, a place where silence was alive, and every living being who entered was never seen again. He said the name of this place was never written, for writing would call it into presence. It was only told in breath and dream. The chamber seemed to lean closer around him. The crystal pulsed beneath his hand, as though the map itself recognized the telling. The aliens shivered, their voices hushed. Now some swore. The glow of the slab dimmed whenever Daniel spoke. The missing system, waiting like a wound that could never close. One alien elder muttered that such secrets could not be held in fragile human flesh, yet there it was, alive in his words. The council leader struck the stone again, his voice fierce with denial. He commanded Daniel to stop. He shouted that such things were lies planted to sow fear and control, that no human could hold the memory of the ancients. But his words were too late, for the silence of the chamber was deeper than command, and every watcher knew something had awakened here, something no denial could smother. Daniel lowered his hand, but his eyes did not leave the erased space, and he spoke again. He said, "I know these coordinates because they are written in us. They live in human blood and human memory, carried through time. When all else was lost, my people remember what others chose to erase. And that is why you fear us, because even when we're given nothing, we turn it into something. Because even when you erase, we recall. Because even when you silence, we speak again." The words sent a shiver through the chamber like wind through dead stone. One of the alien scholars with wings of glass asked, "Then what is this place? What truth lies hidden in that hollow on the map?" Daniel hesitated, his breath trembling, for though he had spoken with certainty, the full truth lay beyond his reach. He knew only fragments, old warnings, half-remembered lines about hunger, and silence about a door that should never open. Yet even fragments carried weight, and he feared to give them voice. Still, the council demanded answers. They leaned closer, their voices sharp. They wanted to know if this missing system was a weapon or a prison or a scar, and whether humans sought to claim it. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment before opening them again, his face pale, but resolved. He said, "It is none of these, and yet it is all of them. It is not a weapon, but it can make every weapon meaningless. It is not a prison, yet it traps all who enter. It is not a scar, yet it bleeds into every age, and this is why it was erased." The chamber shuddered with fear. Some aliens hissed and recoiled. Others pressed forward, desperate for more. One voice cracked with terror, asking why humanity would even keep such knowledge alive. Daniel answered softly, Because forgetting is more dangerous than remembering, because what is erased still waits in the dark, and one day it will rise again, whether you see it or not. The crystal map pulsed once more, light rippling outward like a wave, as though the missing space itself answered his words. And for a heartbeat the chamber filled with whispers, not from mouths, not from throats, but from the stone itself, echoes of something older than time brushing against minds, and leaving them cold. One alien screamed, clutching his head, another fell to his knees trembling, while Daniel stood rooted in place, hearing not terror, but recognition. The council leader's face twisted with rage and fear. He declared the map cursed and demanded it be destroyed. He called for guards to seize Daniel and silence him before his words spread beyond the chamber, but others stepped between the guards, and the human, their eyes wide with dread. They said, "No voice must be silenced, for the map itself has spoken, and now we must listen." Daniel stood at the center, caught between fear and protection, between counsel and scholars, between silence and truth. He raised his hand one last time and whispered a vow, not only to the council, not only to the explorers, but to the galaxy itself. He said, "I will go to the missing place, I will find what you fear to see, and I will return with the truth that no erasure can bury." The chamber froze, his vow echoing through the ruined world, heavy and unbroken, as the glow of the map flickered and pulsed again and again, as though it marked his promise into the very stars. The vow spoken by Daniel spread like fire through the chamber. Every alien in the hall froze their breath, caught in the cold silence that followed his words. The crystal slab pulsed with a faint glow, like the heartbeat of something buried deep beneath time, and no one dared to move. The council leader narrowed his eyes, filled with fury, yet behind that fury there was fear. And it was this fear that made every word Daniel spoke impossible to ignore. Whispers ran like a storm through the gathered beings. Some claimed the human was cursed, some said he was chosen, some argued that no creature should ever walk toward the erased system, yet none could deny the weight of what they had just witnessed. The map itself seemed to acknowledge him, and though many wished to cast him aside, none dared to silence the stone. Daniel stood still, his body heavy with the burden of his vow, yet his mind clear. He felt the eyes of the galaxy press down on him, but he did not shrink. Instead, he held the silence, letting it shape him, letting it bind him to the promise he had spoken. Then slowly, he lowered his hand from the crystal, its glow dimming, yet not dying, as though waiting for him to return. The council leader struck the ground with his staff, demanding order. His voice rose sharp as broken glass. He called Daniel reckless, arrogant, dangerous to all life in the galaxy. He declared that the human should be detained until his words could be tested, until the map itself could be locked away. But before the guards could move, a voice broke through the chaos. An elder scholar, wings glimmering like shards of light, stood tall and firm and said, "No, if the human is bound, the truth will be bound with him." Others joined their voices, some cautious, some bold. They said the vow was dangerous, but so was ignorance. They said the human should not be chained, but guided, tested, watched for. In his path lay answers that the galaxy had buried and now needed again. The council leader raged, but his fury was swallowed by the rising tide of voices that would not be silenced. Daniel felt the weight of 1,000 stares, but he did not waver. He said, "If you fear me, then come with me. If you think me weak, then watch me. If you believe me false, then walk beside me and see for yourself. But I will not step back from the erase system. I will find what waits there." The chamber trembled, not from stone nor from storm, but from the ripple of choice. For the galaxy had always chosen silence, always chosen erasure. But now, in the hands of a single human, a new path began, and no one knew where it would lead. When the council could not agree, the decision fell to the crystal itself. Its glow surged once more, stretching across the chamber, filling every corner with light that burned yet did not consume. Patterns shifted across its surface, and for a moment the erase system flickered like a shadow, returning, then vanished again, leaving only silence. The message was clear. The map would not release its secret to silence. It would only yield to a seeker, and Daniel was the one it had chosen. At last the council leader relented, though bitterness clung to every word he said. "So be it. The human will walk this path, but he will not walk it alone. A ship will be sent, an escort of many races. They will see what he sees, and if death waits there, it will not fall upon humanity alone." Daniel bowed his head, not in defeat, But in respect he did not wish to stand apart. He wished only to walk forward, and now the path was open. He turned once more to the map, tracing with his eyes the hollow place where the missing system should be. His voice soft, but steady, he whispered, "Soon I will find you." The decision spread quickly beyond the chamber, across the ruins, across the stars. Whispers flew on wings of rumor and fear. They said the humans had claimed the erased world. They said the council had been broken by a single voice. They said the oldest secret of the galaxy would be uncovered at last. And though many trembled, some hungered for the truth. That night, Daniel stood alone at the edge of the ruins, staring into the broken horizon. The stars above burned like cold fire, and among them his eyes sought the place he had spoken of. Though it was hidden, though it was erased, he felt it calling, not in words, but in silence, deep and heavy silence that pressed against his bones. He wondered what waited there, and whether he would survive, but he did not regret his vow. As he stood, a shadow approached. It was the elder scholar with wings of glass, her eyes heavy with memory. She said, "You carry a weight greater than any world. Do you understand what you have done?" Daniel answered quietly, "I understand enough. I know that silence cannot last forever. I know that what was erased still breathes, and I know that someone must face it." She studied him, her wings shimmering faintly in the starlight. Then she nodded once and said, "Then, may the galaxy stand ready for what you awaken." The next day, preparations began. Ships were gathered, crews, chosen, supplies loaded. Every race sent one or two to join the journey, some out of duty, some out of curiosity, some out of fear. Daniel walked among them, feeling their eyes upon him, some filled with trust, others with suspicion, yet all of them bound by the same path toward the erased system. When the hour came, Daniel stood before the vessel chosen for the voyage, sleek and strong, built for endurance, not for war. Its hull shimmered with the marks of many worlds, united not by trust, but by necessity. The crew gathered behind him, a strange chorus of shapes and colors, wings and claws, scales and skin, each carrying the hopes and fears of their people. Daniel turned to face them, his voice calm, yet strong. He said, "We walk into the unknown together. What waits there may be death, maybe silence, may be truth, but whatever it is, we will face it as one." The ramp rose, the engines roared, the ground trembled as the ship lifted into the sky, leaving behind the ruins, leaving behind the council, leaving behind the safety of ignorance. The stars opened wide before them, endless and cold. Daniel sat in the chamber of command, his hand resting against the console, his eyes fixed on the void ahead. As the ship cut across, the dark silence filled the halls, not heavy, not fearful, but waiting like breath held before a storm. Daniel closed his eyes once more and whispered to himself the words that bound him, "I will find you, and I will return with truth." The journey through the void was not silent, though no words were spoken, for every mind on the vessel carried questions that burned like stars, questions of fear, questions of truth, questions of what waited beyond the erased system. Daniel sat at the heart of the ship, watching as the stars stretched into streams of light, the galaxy unfolding before him like a river of fire and shadow, his hand steady, yet his heart pounding with every beat. Around him the crew moved in silence, their eyes darting, their breath shallow, though they came from worlds scattered across the galaxy. Their silence was one silence, one born of uncertainty. None trusted the human, yet none could deny the vow he had made, or the strange power the crystal map had shown him. The erased system was calling, and now they were bound to follow. Days passed with slow wait time, dragging heavy against their bones. The ship cut through the dark, its engines humming like a low song. Daniel spent long hours tracing charts, comparing the ancient star map with the living galaxy around them. Every pattern matched, every star aligned, until they drew closer to the void where the erased system should lie, and there the stars began to falter. The first to speak was a navigator with eyes of silver. She whispered that the light of the stars dimmed ahead, not hidden by dust, not shadowed by stone, but dimmed as though the very sky was afraid to shine. The others crowded near, their faces reflecting the strange fading glow. They asked what could drain the light from the galaxy, what could make the stars themselves fall silent. Daniel did not answer, for his eyes were fixed on the dark expanse that spread like a wound in the night sky. It was no ordinary void. It was deeper, sharper, as though carved by a hand older than time. He leaned forward, his voice low, yet steady, saying this is that the erased system lies within that darkness. The crew shuddered, some muttered prayers, others sharpened weapons, though they knew weapons might be useless in the face of what they sought. Their captain, an alien with scales that glowed faint blue, placed a clawed hand upon the console and said, "Once we cross that threshold, we may never return. Are you certain, human, that this is the place?" Daniel turned his gaze, firm, his voice unshaken. "Yes, I am certain." With no other path before them, the ship advanced into the darkness. The light of the stars behind them dimmed, until the void swallowed all color, all shine, all warmth. Silence pressed heavy like stone. Their breaths grew shallow, their hearts raced as if the void itself sought to still their lives. Daniel felt the weight pressing on his chest, yet he refused to yield. His mind clung to the vow, his spirit burned with the truth that silence could not last forever. Hours passed in the endless dark until the sensors blinked with faint readings, a whisper of energy, a flicker of light. The crew leaned forward, eyes wide, hearts trembling. The navigator spoke again, her voice quivering. "There is something ahead, not a world, not a star, something else." Daniel stepped closer to the display and saw the shape that glimmered faint in the abyss, a structure vast and jagged like the skeleton of a god, drifting where no world should be. The crew gasped. Whispers filled the chamber. Some called it a tomb, others called it a fortress. Daniel whispered one word, "home," though none understood what he meant. As they drew closer, the structure grew clearer. Towers of stone and metal spiraled outward, twisted like the ribs of some ancient beast. Symbols older than memory carved into every surface, glowing faintly with light that pulsed like a dying heart. Daniel pressed his hand to the glass, his breath slow. He said this was not erased, this was hidden. The ship circled slowly, engines humming low, as the crew stared at the vast shape stretching before them, their voices filled with awe and fear. They asked what hand could build such a thing, what power could hide it from the galaxy, and why would the star map mark it as erased? Daniel turned from the window, his eyes burning with determination. He said, "We are going inside." The council envoy on board objected, her voice sharp with fear. She said, "No, this place is death. This place was meant to remain buried." But Daniel stood firm, his words calm, but unyielding. "If it was meant to remain buried, the map would not have called us here. The crystal chose, and I will not turn away." The others hesitated, torn between fear and duty, until at last the captain gave the order, "Prepare for entry." The ship drifted toward a vast archway, carved into the structure, wide enough for their vessel to pass through. Inside, darkness thicker than the void beyond, yet lined with faint lines of light that glowed as they entered, as if awakening from sleep. The crew trembled as the glow spread through the walls, lighting their path like veins of fire. Daniel stood at the front, his eyes locked ahead, his body tense yet ready. The chamber they entered was immense, a hollow sphere stretching farther than sight, its walls covered in symbols that shifted as though alive. The light pulsed brighter, with every moment filling the ship with a hum that resonated through their bones. Daniel stepped forward to the viewing glass, his hand pressed against it, his eyes wide with wonder. He whispered, "This place remembers us." Suddenly the light surged, the walls flared with brilliance, and a voice, not sound but thought, echoed through the chamber, ancient, heavy, vast. It said, "You have returned, you who were erased, you who were forgotten, you who cannot be destroyed." The crew cried out, clutching their heads. But Daniel stood, unmoving, his mind clear, his voice answering, "Who are you?" The presence shifted, filling the space with weight like mountains, like oceans. Its answer came, "I am the guardian of silence. I am the keeper of memory. I am the one who buried the world that should never be." Daniel's breath caught, yet he did not falter. He asked then, "Why call to me? Why awaken now?" The answer thundered through every mind, "Because you are human, and only you can finish what was begun." The crew staggered, fear gripping them, whispers rising. They said, "This is madness. This is doom. This is the end." Daniel turned to them, his face pale, but his eyes sharp. He said, "No, this is the beginning. Whatever was erased, whatever was buried, it waits for us, and we will find it." The chamber trembled, light blazing brighter. The structure groaned like a beast stirring from slumber. The crew held their breath. The ship shuddered as though caught in the grip of something vast. Daniel stood tall at the center, his vow unbroken, his spirit unshaken, and he whispered to himself, "I will not turn back." The chamber of light shook with force that rippled through the ship, every wall alive with fire symbols, shifting faster than eyes could follow. The crew clung to their stations, while Daniel stood, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the heart of the sphere. The voice that had filled their minds returned, louder, stronger, echoing with power beyond measure. It said, "The erased world waits in silence. Yet silence cannot hold it forever. You have come as foretold." The crew cried out in protest, their voices layered with fear, their alien tongues twisting in panic. Some shouted that they must flee, others begged their captain to reverse the engines. Yet Daniel raised a single hand, and the chamber's still delight seemed to bend toward him, his voice calm, yet sharp as a blade. He said, "We did not come this far to turn back." The guardian presence pulsed heavy through their bones, answering with words like thunder. "You carry the blood of those who made war upon eternity." The world erased was not destroyed. It was hidden, for it held the power to end all life, or to forge anew. Only the hands of your kind can touch. Only the will of humanity can awaken it. The crew recoiled, their eyes wide, their breaths heavy. One alien whispered through trembling lips, "Humans are fragile, humans are reckless. How could such beings hold such a fate?" Daniel turned his gaze on them, his voice low yet steady. He said, "Because fragility is not weakness, and recklessness is not madness. It is courage in the face of the unknown." The structure groaned around them, lines of light converging toward a single path, a corridor opening like the mouth of a great beast. The captain, with scales glowing faint blue, narrowed his eyes and asked, "Human, what lies ahead?" Daniel answered with no hesitation, "The erased world waits beyond this path, and I will walk it." Fear spread through the crew like fire, yet something stronger began to rise, a pull of curiosity, a hunger to know the truth. They had crossed the void, they had seen the skeleton of a god. They could not now deny the call. The captain gave a single nod and ordered the ship to follow the corridor. The vessel slid through the path, light guiding them deeper into the heart of the structure, every wall alive with shifting patterns, some shaped like stars, some shaped like eyes watching unblinking. The crew shivered, yet Daniel stepped forward, hands pressed against the glass, watching the glow as though it spoke only to him. At last they reached the end of the corridor, a vast chamber unlike the first. At its center floated a sphere of blackness deeper than void, yet edged with threads of light that pulsed like veins. It hung silent, yet alive, as though breathing. Daniel whispered, "This is it, the gateway to the erased world." The guardian voice returned, filling every corner of their minds. "You have found what was hidden, yet to open the path, one must choose. Once the gate awakens, there is no return. The erased world will rise again, whether as salvation or as ruin rests upon the hands that awaken it." The council envoy trembled, her eyes wide with terror. She shouted that this must never be opened, that some doors were locked for a reason. She begged the captain to turn back, yet Daniel spoke over her, his voice unwavering, "We were called here for this moment. If we turn back, the silence will not last, and the galaxy will never know what waits in the dark. I will choose." The sphere pulsed, brighter threads of light stretching toward the ship, brushing its hull with sparks that hissed like whispers. Daniel pressed his palm to the glass, his voice steady, though his heart pounded within him. He said, "Open the gate." The chamber roared, the sphere erupted with light that tore through the void. The crew shielded their eyes, their bodies trembling. The structure shook as though alive, the gate expanding until the ship was dragged forward, pulled into the sphere by power beyond measure. Darkness swallowed them, then light burned brighter than stars. When the light faded, they were no longer within the structure. They drifted above a world unlike any other. It hung in the void, not black, not green, not blue, but shifting with colors that rippled like water, mountains shaped like blades, seas glowing faint beneath, skies cracked with fire. The crew gasped, unable to speak, unable to breathe. Daniel stared, his voice a whisper, "This is the erased world." The guardian voice returned, softer yet heavier, as though burdened by memory. It said, "Here lies the world that was cut from the galaxy, for it was the cradle of a power too vast to trust. It was hidden for fear of destruction, yet its secret could not remain buried forever." The ship descended slowly, drawn by invisible force into the atmosphere. The air shimmered with strange energy. Lightning flickered across the skies, as though the world itself was alive. The crew trembled, their instruments failing, unable to read the surface, unable to predict what lay ahead. Daniel stood tall, his hands clenched, his vow unbroken. He whispered, "We are meant to be here." They landed upon a plain of glass-like stone, stretching farther than sight, every surface etched with lines glowing faint like veins of fire. The ground trembled beneath their feet, though no wind moved, no sound, carried only the hum of power endless. And deep the crew stepped cautiously, their breaths heavy, their eyes wide. One whispered, "This place is not dead, this place is waiting." Daniel knelt, touching the glowing stone, his hand shaking as warmth spread through his skin. Visions flashed in his mind, stars burning, falling, wars raging, voices crying, a hand reaching through darkness. Then silence, his breath caught, his eyes wide. He whispered, "This world remembers." The ground rumbled, harder cracks of light spreading outward from where his hand had touched the air. Thickened, the hum grew louder, the crew staggered, clutching their heads. The council envoy screamed, "Stop this, stop before it wakes." Yet Daniel pressed his palm harder, his voice rising, "No, it must wake." The sky above split with fire, towers of stone rose from the plains, symbols alive with light, swirling in patterns no mind could comprehend. The world itself stirred, as though roused from endless sleep. The crew fell to their knees, overwhelmed by power beyond imagination. The captain cried out, "Human, what have you done?" Daniel stood, his body trembling, his voice steady. "I have done what was always meant. The erased world is not a tomb, it is a beginning." The towers rose higher, the ground shook with force that rattled the bones of every living being on the ship. The light blazed brighter until the world itself seemed to breathe. Daniel raised his hands, his face lit by the glow, his eyes filled with determination, and he whispered, "Then let it awaken." The air split with thunder, the light surged, the world roared alive. The crew screamed in awe and terror, and the erased world opened its eyes. The world shook as though awakening from a sleep that had lasted beyond ages. Light burst from cracks across its surface, racing into the skies like rivers of fire. The crew clung to the ship as the ground beneath trembled. Daniel stood unshaken, his eyes locked on the towers rising around them, each one carved with shifting symbols that blazed with power. The guardian voice returned, heavier than thunder, deeper than oceans. It said, "The erased world has opened, and what was hidden now breathes. Once more the choice cannot be undone. The fate of countless stars now rests upon those who walk here." The council envoy screamed, her face pale with terror. She cried that humanity had doomed them all, that the world had been locked away to keep the galaxy safe. Yet the captain turned his eyes upon Daniel, his voice sharp and demanding. He said, "Human, what is this place? What have you awakened?" Daniel stepped forward into the glow, his voice steady, though his heart pounded with every beat. He said, "This is not destruction. This is memory, the first world carved from fire before time itself. The place where creation and ending were one. The galaxy feared it, so they buried it, yet they could not erase it, for nothing born here can be erased." The ground cracked further, great shapes rising from beneath the stone like mountains pulling themselves from slumber, each form carved with faces that were not alive, yet not dead, their eyes blazing with light, their voices a chorus of whispers too vast to understand. The crew staggered, their ears ringing, their bodies heavy, as though the air itself pressed down upon them. One alien soldier raised his weapon in panic, firing into the light. Yet the beam was swallowed, vanishing into nothing. The guardian voice thundered, "Foolish child, no weapon can harm what is born of this world. The only weapon here is choice." Daniel turned to the crew, his voice strong and urgent. He said, "We cannot fight this world. We must listen. It was hidden, not destroyed, which means it carries truth that others fear. The question is what that truth demands of us." The air split, open a path forming between the towers, lines of fire stretching like a road. Daniel moved toward it, his steps steady, though every breath felt heavy. The captain called after him, saying, "You cannot walk alone." Yet Daniel did not stop. He answered, "Then follow, if you have the courage for the truth." The crew followed, though fear carved their faces. The envoy, shaking her head in disbelief, muttering again and again, "This cannot be allowed, this cannot be allowed." Yet her feet carried her forward as though drawn by power. She could not resist. The path led them into the heart of the towers, a vast circle carved with patterns that twisted like living things. The center burned with a pool of light, shifting as though liquid, yet endless. Daniel stepped to its edge, his reflection, not his own, but 1,000 faces, human, alien, and something far older. His breath caught as the pool spoke. The voice was not thunder, not whisper, but something deeper. It said, "Children of stars, you carry the mark of those who began the first war, the war that tore light from shadow, and shadow from light, the war that erased worlds to save the rest. The world you stand upon was the heart of that war. It was cut from the map, not because it was weak, but because it was too strong." The crew froze their minds, spinning. The captain forced himself to speak, his voice cracking with, he asked then, "Why call us back? Why now, after all this time?" The pool shifted faces, forming shapes, breaking one after another. It answered, "Because silence cannot last forever. The chains that bind power weaken with every age, and only those who remember struggle can wield it without falling to it. Humanity was born from fragility and survival. You are not like the others. Your hands make weapons of stone, of fire, of thought itself. And so the world calls you." Daniel knelt at the pool, his eyes locked on the swirling light, his voice quiet yet clear. He asked, "What does it want from us?" The pool brightened, answering, "It wants choice awake in its heart, and the galaxy will change forever. Deny it, and it will return to silence. But the silence will not last. The chains are breaking. The question is whether you will guide what comes or let it rise unshaped." The envoy shrieked, tears streaking down her face. She cried, "Do not listen. This is temptation. This is doom. If humanity takes this power, nothing will stop them. They will burn every star." She turned to the captain, pleading, "Do not allow this." Yet the captain said nothing, his eyes fixed on Daniel, waiting. Daniel stood tall, the glow casting his face in fire, his voice steady though burdened. He said, "We did not come here by accident. We were called because we endure where others fall, because we fight even when fragile, because we dream even when broken. This world saw that in us and chose us." The ground rumbled harder, the towers shone brighter, the pool of light began to rise, swirling around Daniel, wrapping him in threads that burned yet did not harm. The crew cried out, shielding their eyes. The guardian voice thundered one last time, "The moment has come. Human, will you awaken the erased world?" Daniel clenched his fists, his breath steady, his heart fierce. He looked at the captain, at the crew, at the envoy, trembling with fear. Then back at the pool, his voice rang clear as steel, "I will not let fear chain the future. I choose to awaken it." The pool roared, light bursting upward, swallowing Daniel whole. The crew screamed, reaching out, yet pulled back by force beyond strength. The towers blazed like suns, the ground split open, the sky erupted with fire. The world itself shuddered, as though alive. The erased world screamed, and then breathed. The light dimmed, the pool emptied. Daniel still stood, though changed, his eyes glowing, his voice deeper, as though many spoke through him. He said, "It is done. The erased world is awake." The crew stared, trembling, unable to speak. The captain at last found words, his voice soft. "What have you become?" Human. Daniel raised his gaze to the burning sky, his voice heavy with power and sorrow. "I am the voice of a world that remembers, and the galaxy will never be the same again." The erased world breathed beneath them, a pulse of power that rippled through the air, the ground alive beneath their feet, the towers twisting, light reaching toward the sky like fingers of fire. Daniel stood at the center, his body humming with energy, his eyes glowing as though the soul of the world flowed through him. The crew staggered around him, awe and fear gripping every heart. The envoy, trembling, said, "This cannot be real." The guardian voice spoke through Daniel, now many voices intertwined like a chorus older than time. It said, "The world remembers, and now it speaks. Through you, every choice you make will echo across the galaxy. Every thought will shape stars. Every movement will awaken or silence civilizations. You are not alone, for the galaxy watches, yet only your hands can guide it." Daniel raised his arms, the light flowing around him, threads of fire and shadow weaving with his breath. The crew crouched, shielding their eyes, but unable to look away. The captain said, "Human, you hold power no race has ever held. What will you do?" Daniel's voice rang clear through the air. "I will awaken what was erased, not to destroy, but to show that life endures even where silence ruled." The towers trembled, their faces alive with memory, shifting patterns reflecting wars, forgotten civilizations. Erased. Daniel felt the pulse of every being that had touched this world, the weight of history pressing upon him. Yet his mind clear, his heart steady. He said, "We carry the past within us, yet the future is ours to shape." The light surged, brighter threads of color wrapping the ship, around them lifting it, as if the world itself welcomed them. The envoy screamed, "Do not touch, it do not wield," what was hidden, yet Daniel's voice softened, not an argument, but in certainty. Fear is the hand of those who cannot endure. We are human, and endurance is our strength, and now the galaxy will see it. The pool at the center rose higher, glowing with threads of light connecting every tower, every line of stone, every symbol older than stars. The world vibrated with memory. Daniel extended his hands, and the threads responded, winding through his fingers into his mind, into his soul. A language older than speech, older than thought, filled him. It was not sound, it was vision, it was understanding, it was the essence of the world itself. The crew staggered but could not look away. They felt the power without fully comprehending it, lightning of thought and fire of memory, running across every surface. The sky above cracked and burned, yet not destructively, instead illuminating the endless structures like a cathedral of creation itself. Daniel's voice rose above it all. "I see it, I feel it, I carry it, and I will guide it." The towers shifted more violently, the ground trembling as if the world tested them. The guardian voice pulsed with approval, yet caution. It said, "You awaken the erased world, but control is fragile, even in hands of willful mortals. Every choice now will ripple, and every mistake may shatter the future." Daniel's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. "The past cannot bind the future, the dead cannot dictate the living. I will hold the memory and wield it with care." A sudden flash of light exploded from the towers, blinding the crew. Daniel's body wrapped in threads of pure energy. The envoy screamed, "We are doomed," yet the captain reached toward Daniel, saying, "Do not fall, human." But Daniel did not fall. He rose, glowing stronger than the fires around them, the power of the world flowing through him, his mind 100 minds, 1,000 memories, yet singular, his heart unbroken. The towers stretched skyward, the pool shattered into threads that swirled around Daniel, shaping the air. Like living ribbons, the world sang its memory into him, voices of civilizations lost, of wars ended, of alliances broken and born again, all converging in a pulse of understanding. Daniel extended his hands outward, the threads of light shooting across the plains, touching the ship, touching the crew, touching the void beyond the planet, the galaxy, waiting for their signal. The envoy fell to her knees, tears streaking her face. She whispered, "How can one being carry so much?" Yet Daniel's voice reached her across the threads of memory. Because fragility can endure, because silence cannot contain life, because humans do not yield to oblivion, they learn, they survive, they awaken, and now the galaxy will remember. Lightning struck the towers, the skies cracking with fire. Yet the world did not crumble. Instead, it bent to the will of the awakened, guiding itself. Through Daniel's hands, shapes forming cities of light, flowing rivers of energy, breathing forests of crystal and stone. Yet he did not dominate. He guided every spark with care. He whispered to the world live, and it shimmered bright with life. The crew stood, trembling, unable to comprehend fully, yet feeling the majesty. The captain finally spoke, "Human, you have done what none could even dream to do." Daniel's gaze swept across them, his eyes warm, his voice carrying weight and hope. "We carry the erased world now, not as tyrants, but as stewards, not to rule, but to remember, not to destroy, but to protect." The towers ceased trembling, the pool of light finally resting, threads wrapping gently around Daniel. Like a cloak of memory, the world beneath calm, yet alive, the guardian voice soft. "Now," said, "you have awakened it, you have held it, and yet the choice continues, for life will never be still, and you will guide it across ages. The galaxy will watch, and the world will breathe under your hands." Daniel looked around the crew at their pale, awed faces, at the envoy, finally quiet, at the captain, his hand resting on the console. He whispered to them, "All we have begun, something older than us, something erased, no longer silent. The galaxy will never forget the erased world or what humans carry within them." The skies cleared, light shining on towers etched with history, memory flowing through every surface, the air alive, yet calm, the pool of light gently fading, threads remaining as a map of all that had awakened. Daniel stepped forward, breathing steady, his hands glowing faint with residual energy. The envoy finally spoke, her voice small but steady, "It is done, it is alive, and it will not harm unless guided." Yet Daniel answered softly, life itself can be dangerous, but also endures. The captain said what now human Daniel turned his gaze outward to the horizon, to the stars now brighter than ever. He whispered, now we return, we bring knowledge, not war. We bring memory, not silence. We carry the erased world in our hands, and in our hearts the galaxy will change, and we will endure. The crew looked upon him with awe. The envoy finally nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes, the towers behind them glowing faintly as the world rested calm. Yet vigilant Daniel stepped to the ship, his hands still tingling with the memory of power, his voice low but clear. The erased world is awake, and we are its stewards. The galaxy will remember us all. Above them stars blinked, witnessing the rise of something older than empires, older than time itself. And in the heart of the human, all that had been erased flowed alive, ready to guide the future, ready to endure.